Hello, hi everyone. Welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley, and this is a show where we are slowly cooking our way through all of the food from my childhood. Today we're diving back into our series dedicated to the wonderful, weird world of Asian fusion cuisine with a shot at a miso glazed fish taco. For those who have been following along, we have now done a few very fun and creative dishes in this series, including a Chinese lapchang sausage carbonara, and of course the Woo Can Cook fried rice pop-up's signature dish, our fried rice burrito earlier last month as well. More specifically, today we're going to be making use of my absolute favorite cut of fish for pan searing, which is some skin-on salmon fillets. This is going to pair nicely with the shallow fry method that we're going to be using, which works particularly well in our round-bottomed wok that we're going to use, which we'll also dive into as well. The thin skin of our salmon here is going to crisp up nicely in our wok fry for a super crispy but also still super tender piece of salmon. We'll be pairing that with a rich miso-based glaze, some fresh avocado, lime juice, and finally a quick slaw done with some Taiwanese cabbage, shallots, and my personal favorite, some Chinese red vinegar. Okay, so let's get into it. Kicking things off today, I'm bringing out the big boy and getting to work on our cabbage here. This is some Taiwanese cabbage that I'm using, which is distinctively flatter than most other cabbage heads that you'll find here in the States. It's a little bit sweeter and more tender than your more standard Napa or white cabbage, and it is also pretty commonly found in Chinese stir fries, but if you can't find this stuff, plain old Napa or white cabbage will also work just fine. We're thinly slicing half a head of this and then getting to work on our shallots next. This is 3 medium shallots that I'm removing the root and tip ends, peeling, and then similarly slicing thinly as well. Then finally, rounding this all out is about 2 ounces or 1 bunch of cilantro, which I'm separating from its stems and then adding to my mixing bowl as well. Diving into my vinegars next, this is 2 tablespoons of red vinegar, which has a brightness, tartness, and a little bit of sweetness that's going to pair well with our slaw today. If you can't find this stuff, you can also swap this out for some plain old apple cider vinegar though too. I'm rounding this out with 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar, a tablespoon of white sugar, and a pinch of kosher salt to taste. Then I'm tossing everything to combine and letting this all get to know each other for about 30 minutes while we move on to our miso glaze next. Alright, so kicking things off with our glaze here, I'm starting with the 2 ingredients that you'll pretty consistently see come up in many Woo Can Cook recipes. This is 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic, followed by 1 inch or about 1 tablespoon of finely minced ginger, both of which are going straight into my mixing bowl for our glaze. Then next for our wet ingredients is 4 tablespoons of soy sauce and 2 tablespoons of sesame oil to start, followed by 2 tablespoons of brown sugar and 1 tablespoon of mirin for some nice malted sweetness and acidity. Then finally, rounding all of this out is 1 tablespoon of miso paste. Remember that this stuff is very concentrated, so a little bit is going to go a long way for us today. I'm switching to a fork or a whisk here to break down that miso paste and then whisking everything together until a smooth glaze forms. Finally, I'm setting this all aside while we get to our sides next, which is going to be half of a lime that I'm slicing into wedges, followed by half of an avocado. Now, I've seen a lot of strange hacks floating around the internet to help tell whether or not an avocado is ripe. I've heard that popping the stem off and then checking the color of the inside works well, but it's also not very useful if the stem pops off before you get to using it though. Lots of times you'll even see avocados missing the stem already at the grocery store. My preference is to just make sure that it's tender and soft to the touch, but if you've got a weird hand-me-down hack for checking your avocado's ripeness though, then you do you, and also tell me what those are in the comments, because it's always fun to hear those things. In any case, I'm slicing this open around the seed and then storing the unused half with my leftover onions to help keep it fresh. Then I'm giving the seed a firm whack with my knife and twisting until it pops out. Now, I know what you'll want to do is try and pull the seed out with your non-dominant hand like this, which makes me very nervous just watching, because if you slip, that knife is going right into your hand. So instead, flip that knife over and just pop that seed out with your thumb instead. This is going to be a lot safer and won't result in you cutting your hand open. Finally, I'm slicing this up thinly and then removing with a spoon and setting this all aside while we dive into our salmon next. Okay, so first mistake right off the bat that I totally forgot to do, but what you want to do before doing anything else is score the skin of your salmon here before diving in. Just a couple of slits down the middle should do the trick. Once these go into the wok fry, that skin is going to contract a little bit, causing it to separate from the meat unless you compensate with some scoring, so don't do this. But anyway, we're flipping this skin side down and then brushing the top with our miso marinade until thoroughly coated. We'll be leaving that skin side as is because the bulk of our sear is going to happen on that side and we don't want the sugars in our marinade to cause it to burn. I'm repeating this with my remaining salmon and then heading over to the stove. Over on the stove, I've got my wok heating up as hot as possible, and then I'm adding a lot of peanut oil here, close to half a cup or so. I know that we use a lot of oil in a lot of our stir-fry recipes, but this time I actually do mean it though. We're going to be shallow frying today, which works particularly well in a round-bottomed wok. You'll see why in a sec, but it also requires quite a bit of oil. As always, first, long yao for that nice non-stick surface, and then I'm adding my salmon to the wok, being careful to lay this down away from myself here so that we don't splash hot oil on ourselves again, Wesley. You'll notice that the rounded bottom of my wok is working really nicely with our shallow fry here because it's causing the oil to pool up in the center, which aids in our shallow fry quite a bit by helping submerge more of the salmon in that oil. I'm searing this for 2 minutes with the skin side down, giving it a flip. You should have some nice gorgeous crispy skin by now. And then we're searing it for an additional 45 seconds. Remember that salmon is not like chicken, it's quite a bit more delicate. We're really just looking for texture on the exterior surface at this point, so cook on the second side very briefly. I'm repeating this with my remaining salmon. Mine took 3 batches altogether. Then I'm removing these to a parchment paper lined sheet pan. Then I'm adding one more coat of my miso glaze here and popping this into a 400-degree F oven on the middle rack for 10 minutes until we have a nice, deeply golden exterior. We're letting this rest for 10 minutes before diving in. Remember that as with our steaks and pork chops, if you cut into this too early, all of those wonderful juices that you just locked in with that sear will come pouring out onto your cutting board, and then you'll have some very dry salmon for dinner. So while we're waiting for that to rest, back over on the stove top, I'm removing my wok here to heat up some tortillas. Now, fair warning that this only works on gas ranges, so if you're cooking on induction or coil tops, I'm sorry. But you can also do the same thing on a dry non-stick skillet too. I've got some white corn tortillas here, and then I'm setting my burners to medium-low or essentially simmering heat, and then I'm adding my tortillas right on top of the grates for about 30 seconds per side. The direct heat of that flame is going to work nicely in warming those tortillas up, especially if you've got leftover tortillas like mine that are coming out of the refrigerator. I'm setting these aside in a bowl with a clean dish towel to keep these warm while we cut into our salmon here. We're giving this a large dice and then adding it to my tortillas with a side of red vinegar slaw to start, followed by some fresh avocado, a spoonful of that reserved marinade. You remembered to reserve some marinade, right? A squeeze of some fresh lime juice, and we're ready to eat. Okay, so I'll admit that you can probably count the number of fish-based dishes that we have made in this series on one hand, because I honestly just don't eat a lot of fish, but for what it's worth, this is easily my favorite way of preparing fresh salmon. It has a deeply rich umami and flavor from that miso glaze that's not burnt or charred as often happens with sugar-based glazes and sears. The skin crisps up in the wok fry to add a nice bit of crunch, and then that red vinegar slaw adds a nice bright freshness that balances out the intensity of the miso glaze. I know that skin on salmon is a pretty divisive topic, and I have certainly seen many chefs swear by removing the skin before searing, but I gotta tell you, if you do that, you're throwing out the best part of the fish. Okay, so that's it everyone. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you give this one a shot. If you're new to the channel, this one is part of a larger series that we've been doing that's dedicated to Asian fusion cuisine, where I look for fun, new, and weird ways of inserting ingredients from my pantry into unexpected dishes. So if you haven't checked that out yet, definitely head there next because there's a lot of these. We'll be cooking through this one live on YouTube this coming Tuesday at 6:30 PST, so tune in then and cook along with me if you'd like. Lastly, for the Bay Area locals, the Wu Can Cook Fried Rice Pop-Up will be back at the Hayward Farmers Market next Saturday, so swing by and come say hi then if you can. More about that at wucancook.com/eats. As always, like, comment, subscribe, be nice interneters, and I'll see you soon. Bye.